If you become the department head, everyone will quit. Miles let out a loud cry that caused the office to go silent. Miles tossed his letter of resignation onto my desk, his face smug. He set an example, and the staff members behind him began throwing their resignation letters one by one, totaling 20. However, they all widened their eyes in surprise as soon as they heard what I had to say. Thank heavens. This is a huge comfort. Miles stood with his mouth open, his face going blank. I smiled calmly as I gently glanced around at their faces. You have to decide what is really important at some point in your life. It might be harsh at times and even steer you in the wrong direction, but ultimately, it is up to you what you decide to do. Caleb is my name. I work for a small company in the city and I'm 36 years old. Until recently, my life has been routine and not really exciting. Like everyone else, I completed high school, college, and found employment. After receiving several job offers, I ultimately decided to stay with my current employer because of the pay and type of work. Nothing noteworthy. I work in sales, so I don't have any complaints. I just try my hardest wherever the firm assigns me. But now, for the first time, I have to make a decision that would change my life, and it has me completely perplexed. My coworker Miles is the cause of that. Miles, who is 6 years my junior, recently celebrated his 30th birthday and is proud to have graduated from one of the city's top universities. In terms of mastering the nuances of the work, he is at the top of his game. He is expected to guide the younger employees as a mid-level employee, and the corporation has given him a lot of responsibility throughout the years in the hopes that he will advance. However, that could have unreasonably boosted his ego. Before anyone knew it, Miles had developed into the type of unruly worker who was always complaining about the business. I ought to be earning more money given my abilities. Instead, I'm stuck performing dull job, I seldom ever get raises, and I don't have enough vacation days. As his immediate supervisor, I would receive these concerns directly, and I couldn't help but be irritated by his conceit. Even though Miles put in a lot of effort in his own way, his passion frequently backfired, resulting in both sporadic victories and numerous mistakes that undid all of his hard work. Although he appeared to consider himself an elite, he was responsible for some kind of issue 1 in 3 instances. Our clients were frequently bewildered by his constant addition of his own twist to the usual procedures, even though he should have been aware of them. He repeatedly added clauses to contracts without consulting the client beforehand, telling them, "This is the better option. You should definitely try it." As his supervisor, I was always left to clean up the mess. Miles, I appreciate your zeal and your want to help the client, but you can't simply alter the terms without first talking to them. Well, if I get an epiphany, I can't help myself. I suppose an elite like me cannot expect an average employee like you to comprehend. Despite my warnings, Miles would ignore them, as if he believed that I was only envious of his elite status. I could have corrected his wrong behavior if he had been more humble, but that was too much to ask for. He had become so arrogant about his esteemed university education that he was unable to establish positive working ties with the other staff members. Miles took charge of a team of colleagues from the same university who frequently criticized the business. At the same time, he started to despise anyone, even his seniors, who he thought had less education. Naturally, the other employees started to resent Miles and his clique, but none of them quit the company. Even unruly employees were viewed as a necessary evil, and our organization was perennially understaffed. But even with his arrogant demeanor, Miles was just 30, and I secretly hoped he would mature. As his manager, I therefore kept giving him patient advice. The younger staff began to acquire more skills over time, and they quickly overtook Miles in terms of the quantity of deals they had completed. Miles started making disparaging comments at that point, seemingly in an attempt to silence the younger employees who were more noticeable than he was. The younger folks always get the simple jobs, while I'm stuck with the difficult ones. It's really unjust. If you become the department head, everyone will quit. Miles let out a loud cry that caused the office to go silent. Miles tossed his letter of resignation onto my desk, his face smug. He set an example, and the staff members behind him began throwing their resignation letters one by one, totaling 20. However, they all widened their eyes in surprise as soon as they heard what I had to say. Thank heavens. This is a huge comfort. Miles stood with his mouth open, his face going blank. I smiled calmly as I gently glanced around at their faces. You have to decide what is really important at some point in your life. It might be harsh at times and even steer you in the wrong direction, but ultimately, it is up to you what you decide to do. Caleb is my name. I work for a small company in the city and I'm 36 years old. Until recently, my life has been routine and not really exciting. Like everyone else, I completed high school, college, and found employment. After receiving several job offers, I ultimately decided to stay with my current employer because of the pay and type of work. Nothing noteworthy. I work in sales, so I don't have any complaints. I just try my hardest wherever the firm assigns me. But now, for the first time, I have to make a decision that would change my life, and it has me completely perplexed. My coworker Miles is the cause of that. Miles, who is 6 years my junior, recently celebrated his 30th birthday and is proud to have graduated from one of the city's top universities. In terms of mastering the nuances of the work, he is at the top of his game. He is expected to guide the younger employees as a mid-level employee, and the corporation has given him a lot of responsibility throughout the years in the hopes that he will advance. However, that could have unreasonably boosted his ego. Before anyone knew it, Miles had developed into the type of unruly worker who was always complaining about the business. I ought to be earning more money given my abilities. Instead, I'm stuck performing dull job, I seldom ever get raises, and I don't have enough vacation days. As his immediate supervisor, I would receive these concerns directly, and I couldn't help but be irritated by his conceit. Even though Miles put in a lot of effort in his own way, his passion frequently backfired, resulting in both sporadic victories and numerous mistakes that undid all of his hard work. Although he appeared to consider himself an elite, he was responsible for some kind of issue 1 in 3 instances. Our clients were frequently bewildered by his constant addition of his own twist to the usual procedures, even though he should have been aware of them. He repeatedly added clauses to contracts without consulting the client beforehand, telling them, "This is the better option. You should definitely try it." As his supervisor, I was always left to clean up the mess. Miles, I appreciate your zeal and your want to help the client, but you can't simply alter the terms without first talking to them. Well, if I get an epiphany, I can't help myself. I suppose an elite like me cannot expect an average employee like you to comprehend. Despite my warnings, Miles would ignore them, as if he believed that I was only envious of his elite status. I could have corrected his wrong behavior if he had been more humble, but that was too much to ask for. He had become so arrogant about his esteemed university education that he was unable to establish positive working ties with the other staff members. Miles took charge of a team of colleagues from the same university who frequently criticized the business. At the same time, he started to despise anyone, even his seniors, who he thought had less education. Naturally, the other employees started to resent Miles and his clique, but none of them quit the company. Even unruly employees were viewed as a necessary evil, and our organization was perennially understaffed. But even with his arrogant demeanor, Miles was just 30, and I secretly hoped he would mature. As his manager, I therefore kept giving him patient advice. The younger staff began to acquire more skills over time, and they quickly overtook Miles in terms of the quantity of deals they had completed. Miles started making disparaging comments at that point, seemingly in an attempt to silence the younger employees who were more noticeable than he was. The younger folks always get the simple jobs, while I'm stuck with the difficult ones. It's really unjust. He started complaining publicly, and things at work continued to become worse. Despite our staffing shortage, some workers began to express worries that working with Miles was getting harder. He was soon viewed as a problem by the office. Since I was the department manager in charge of managing my team's complaints at the time, I tried my best to control the situation by scheduling meetings with Miles whenever a problem came up. Miles, however, never seemed to believe he was at fault. He would reply, "If you dislike me that much, I can quit any time," even when I gave him stern criticism. My college pals are launching a new business, and they want me to be a co-founder. Miles never took my warning seriously and simply laughed it off, even though I wasn't going to stop him if he truly wanted to quit. Miles seemed to be waiting for me to intervene. "I'm fine with quitting, but without me, this company won't function," he said. I had a headache simply thinking about it, because it was true that losing him would be problematic. Even an employee like Miles was better than none at all, because our company was seriously understaffed, and it was difficult to find new hires. A vicious circle resulted from our hiring all applicants, but the cost of training them further slowed down the process. Miles undoubtedly knew I couldn't push back too strongly because he was fully aware of this predicament. The inevitable occurred as the rest of the firm, and I debated how to deal with Miles. It all began when a younger worker brought in a new customer. Unlike Miles, this employee was modest and willing to learn from his superiors, despite initially being quiet and meek. Since joining the organization, he has been expanding quickly because of his clients' admiration for his serious work ethic. At last, he received recognition as the month's top salesman. All of us applauded and were pleased with his improvement, but Miles was the only one who wasn't. Only because of a longtime client's favoritism did he get that position. Miles complained to himself, "I would have tripled the profits if I had been in his shoes." If that was all he did, it would have been oak, but he began berating the younger worker while claiming to be offering advice. However, the employee had more hands-on experience on the ground despite being younger. Miles became enraged when the junior gently brought this to his attention. "You younger worker, how dare you respond to me? Do you believe that your actions are justified solely by the results?" When Miles shouted, the younger worker could only cower in terror. The younger employee eventually quit the company, despite my hasty intervention to break it up. Soon after, it was evident from the company's attitude that everyone wished Miles had resigned rather than the gifted youngster. I went out of my way to guide him, and now it looks like I drove him out, said Miles, incensed, unaware of his part in this. "I'll quit for sure if that's how you're going to treat me." He got in my face and asked, "Are you okay with that?" He did not, however, appear to be altering his behavior. I only became aware of the gravity of the situation after the young employee who showed promise left. Other valuable employees would surely depart if we retained Miles. Miles' resignation was clearly in the best interests of the corporation, yet it was illegal to fire someone without cause. I'd hoped in private that Miles would genuinely step down, but I was stuck. The tipping point then came one day. As part of a corporate restructuring, it was announced that I had been elevated to the position of department head. As previously stated, our organization had a severe staffing shortage, which contributed to my promotion in my 30s. However, Miles' spirit of competition only seemed to be heightened by this news. If Karen can be promoted to department head, then I should be promoted to manager right now. Rumor had it that Miles was grumbling about this among his own gang. The following day, Miles and his team of 20 employees arrived at my desk, confirming my suspicion that disaster was on the horizon. "What's all this about?" "I'll get right to the point." Miles's booming voice reverberated across the office, bringing the room to a halt. "Either give us a raise or promote us now." He cast a self-satisfied gaze across the silent room before smugly tossing his letter of resignation onto my desk. "We're all leaving if you're going to be the department head. Unless you agree to our demands immediately, of course." The other staff members started hurling their resignation letters at me as well, as if on cue. They must have believed they were essential to the company's survival. I was astounded by their stupid behavior, I gently picked up the 20 resignation letters, feeling bewildered. Miles smirked as he observed me and remarked mockingly, "If we all quit, you'd be in trouble, wouldn't you? What will you do then? You ought to know the solution if you're intelligent enough to be elevated to department head." "You're correct," I answered. "There would be a major issue if you all left, and I would undoubtedly be held responsible for my managerial abilities." Miles and his company grinned contentedly at my answer, nodding to one another as though they had won. However, they were taken aback by what I said next, their eyes wide with shock. Thank heavens. This is a huge comfort. Miles was stunned and gaping in shock as he stood there. I smiled softly as I calmly examined their faces. "I'm happy to hear your actual emotions. I must respect your decision, even though it's regrettable." "What are you talking about? Wait." They obviously didn't think I would truly accept their letters of resignation. Pale now, Miles came running toward me. The group behind him became nervous as a result of his desperate actions. Everyone's faces became hazy with uncertainty, and they all started to whisper nervously to one another. I couldn't help but smile when I saw this, as I knew my intuition had been correct. Miles was the only one who publicly expressed his displeasure with the business. I had a sneaking suspicion that the others had simply followed him mindlessly, caught up in his momentum. Everyone who worked here was aware of our staffing shortage and the difficulty the organization had in terminating employees. They most likely believed that they could easily obtain promotions and greater compensation provided Miles' requests were satisfied. However, achieving your goals without working for them is impossible. That made sense to someone like myself who started at the bottom and worked their way up. However, based only on name recognition, Miles and his team had coasted into our organization from prestigious institutions without experiencing any significant difficulties. They must have joined Miles' revolt without giving it much thought, because they had been raised in a society that constantly condoned selfishness. They were in a full panic now that they had to face the possibility that their resignation letters would be accepted. I heard his group's nervous murmuring behind the pale-faced Miles. "This can't be genuine, can it? I take it that this was only a negotiating strategy. Isn't this typical in other nations?" I sighed in a mix of surprise and frustration at their perplexity. Indeed, there has been prior negotiation for improved wages or working conditions, but these negotiations were always conducted in a cool, collected manner. You would do your homework in advance, give good justifications, and then set up a meeting with the business to talk about a raise. In our organization, they had never threatened to resign until their demands were fulfilled. I made the decision to give them one final opportunity to bargain after glancing at the terrified staff and Miles, who stood resolutely in front of them. "This is the moment if any of you wish to rescind your resignation. Our type of trick has never been attempted by anyone in our company. That's because we are the most talented employees ever." Miles persisted in his haughty assertions despite his pale appearance. However, it was evident behind him that his friends no longer wished to support him. They were shifting uncomfortably, looking down, and no longer supporting their leader. I spoke in a soft voice to the restless bunch. "Is this what you truly want? Are you all leaving because you have real complaints about the company, or are you just mindlessly following orders?" The other staff members were obviously upset by what I said, but Miles kept his flaming eyes on me. I sighed slightly, grinned, and got up after a tight standoff. "I can't do anything if you're all that determined. I'll send your letters of resignation now. I appreciate all of your hard work." I then turned and made my way directly to the president's office. There was a commotion going on behind me, with some employees trying to follow me and others being restrained by Miles. I didn't think it would go this well. I quickly made my way to the president's office while stifling the laughing that was rising within of me. Terminating a worker for business-related grounds is a challenging procedure. Finding a valid reason for termination is challenging, and if something goes wrong, it may result in strained relationships or even legal action. There are serious drawbacks for the business even in the absence of those dangers. Severance pay increases and other subsidies may be discontinued if the termination was caused by the employer. Miles' voluntary resignation was the finest course of action. But even though he kept saying, "What would you do if I quit?" in reality, Miles had never planned to go. Thus, the opportunity I had been waiting for was this collective resignation act. Finally, I gave Mr. Norris, the president of the company, a quick explanation of the situation, stating only the facts. Mr. Norris was obviously perspiring as he held the 20 resignation letters. The company would suffer greatly if 20 employees submitted their resignation letters at once. With a strained voice, he stated, "The company won't survive like this." Assured him, "Please wait. I believe what happens next will change things." After hearing my explanation, Mr. Norris's pale appearance gradually returned. He even grinned as he said me farewell at the end. Ultimately, as he had promised, Miles quit. Right up until the last minute, he continued to gripe about me and the business. "No issue. I'll find another work straight away. But without me, I'm willing to wager that the business would face difficulties." Smugly, he said. "You're right," was my honest response. "Losing all 20 of you would definitely hurt." "I figured as much," Miles said with a sly smile. "However, we will not compromise on our demands." "Requirements?" I cocked my head in perplexity. With assurance, Miles said, "You'll have to comply with our demands if you want us back. A raise or a promotion, perhaps. Actually, you'll need to provide us both because we'll be returning after quitting." "Are you sure about this?" I inquired. "You're really okay with leaving the company and not regretting it?" Miles was still one of my key subordinates in spite of all the difficulties he caused. I gave him some advice out of a last-ditch effort, but Miles simply sneered. He smiled smugly and pushed out his chest, saying, "I know you're sad about losing a great worker like me, but you're the ones who enraged us in the first place. After you see how useful we are, you can give us another call. However, don't wait too long, otherwise we might be snatched up by another business." Miles gave a half-laugh, tossed aside his final remarks, and left the office. I sighed, feeling both frustrated and resigned as I watched his self-assured figure vanish. I summoned Miles back to the office a week later. He was wearing a dapper suit when I next saw him, and his voice was full with barely restrained enthusiasm as he said, "You phoned at last. What's this about? Because you mentioned that you have something to talk about." "Oh, I simply asked that you get your personal items. When you quit, you left some things behind." Miles looked down at the box that held his things, but he did not move. He continued to stare at me as though he was anticipating something more. I asked him once more, "What's wrong? Take your belongings now." Is that really all you wanted from me?" Miles looked at me as though he had been duped, his face puzzled. "Yes, that's all. Make sure you arrive home without incident." No. What's happening here?" Miles was obviously irritated and quickly searched through his possessions as though there was more in the box. "What?" I inquired. "After you departed, I simply didn't want your belongings strewn all over the office. It has to be disposed of." "I did not intend that. Do you need to discuss something with me?" I'd assumed that today would be about hiring me again. I finally recognized that Miles had misinterpreted the situation when he came over to me in horror. After he resigned, Miles apparently thought the business had collapsed, and I had called him back to ask him to take his previous role again. That's what he believed anyway. He must have arrived in a dapper suit, so sure that he would be rehired. It was almost pathetic how much work he put into this misunderstanding. I sternly informed him, "No, we are not hiring at this time. We have no intention of rehiring you." "How are you able to say that?" "I will definitely go to another company if you don't hire me again right away. I just need to spread the news, and the other 19 workers will follow suit." As Miles went on his tirade, his face flushed with annoyance. I became aware that he was not listening to me. It was my duty as his former boss to be honest with him, even though he might find it difficult to accept. Listen, Miles, the other 19 employees didn't resign. Miles' eyes widened in surprise as he froze. No, that isn't possible. They all turned in their letters of resignation to me. They all returned and retracted their letters after that. The only person who truly resigned was you. Miles' face became red with rage as soon as he heard my answer. Those guys betrayed me. It's not so much betrayal as it is that they never really intended to quit in the first place, I said. In actuality, 19 of the staff members, aside from you, came sprinting after me with perspiration on their brows a week ago, when I turned in the 20 resignation letters to the president. They all knelt down and pleaded with me to give their letters of resignation back. We sincerely apologize for creating such a commotion. We never truly intended to give up, and we were merely following Miles's example. I immediately turned around and led the 19 employees who appeared utterly embarrassed back to the president's office after witnessing their heartfelt apologies. I requested that Mr. Norris return their letters of resignation. Miles was obviously agitated and kicked his feet in frustration when I told him what was going on. He cried out, "How could they do this to me?" Desperate for approval, he demanded, "But without the most talented person, the company is still in trouble, right?" In actuality, everyone has been doing a great job covering your workload. The team has really become more cohesive, and productivity has even increased. The office has been considerably livelier since Miles stopped moaning and performing poorly all the time. The atmosphere has improved as everyone had become tired of Miles's constant complaining. There is a more collaborative atmosphere in the office, and staff members are supporting one another and covering for errors. Employee productivity increased as the work environment improved and tasks started to go more smoothly. In fact, compared to when Miles was still with us, sales have gone up in the past week. There have also been improvements in my own work. I've completely shifted the time I used to spend on Miles' problems to my real obligations. The entire firm is celebrating after I was able to close the largest contract of the previous year by refocusing on sales. Additionally, the new hires I've been teaching have at last accumulated enough experience to function on their own. They now contribute significantly to the business and put up a lot of effort. Additionally, our aggressive hiring practices have been successful in attracting bright new personnel. Really, you don't need to worry about anything. You may go on and pursue your own interests. Miles, what? No. Do you mean that I have nowhere to go back to? I'm the best employee, and I'm offering to return. In a desperate attempt to convince me, Miles's voice wavered as though he were about to cry. However, by this point, he had no place at the company. You won't have any trouble obtaining another work if you are as talented as you claim to be. You'll have an even better one soon, I'm sure. However, I've been employed by this organization for a very long time. As a seasoned worker, I believed I could contribute, he said, gripping the box containing his possessions. Miles refused to give up and continued obstinately. I didn't say anything even while he went on, and finally his patience gave out. Miles abruptly started to let out his frustrations by collapsing to the ground. I never really had any intention of leaving the company. All I wanted was better circumstances. You handled the negotiation terribly if that's the case. Negotiation is not a real process when demands are made while brandishing a resignation letter. Miles finally started crying at my comment. He grabbed the hem of my suit and started making absurd explanations. Caleb, you are to blame. You ought to have stopped me as my supervisor. I made a significant contribution to the organization, and you ought to have done more to retain me. Miles had never truly respected the organization or me, as seen by the blatantness of his attempt to place the responsibility elsewhere. But I wasn't going to try to keep him, regardless of what he said. Don't worry, you're already officially resigned. Miles seems to have finally come to the conclusion that he had no chance whatsoever of being hired again. I gave him one last shove to get over his desperate grasping as he gazed up at me. In addition, you mentioned that your friend asked you to assist in launching a new business. You ought to concentrate on that. Miles appeared momentarily perplexed, as though he was not understanding what I was saying. Then he got up shakily, his lips quivering, as though recalling his own deception. You're right. Yes, I do have a pal. In fact, we are just getting serious about launching a business. Miles muttered, his eyes adrift as he carried on talking. His mouth twisted into a fake smile as he gave me one more look. Well, I suppose my departure is well timed. I'm going to work for my friend. Are you truly comfortable with that, though? I didn't question him about it, even though it was obvious from his behavior that the tale of his friend inviting him was untrue. Good luck at your new company, I replied instead, and then I watched Miles walk out of the office. After all, he is a mature professional who ought to be able to own up to his mistakes. Miles stumbled down the corridor and permanently departed the organization. The people in the group who had once supported him didn't even bother to come and say goodbye. That demonstrated Miles's lack of genuine respect or influence. Ultimately, there was no indication that Miles and his friend were going to launch a business. Rather, rumors began to circulate that he had been going to the job office in a frantic attempt to obtain employment. He attended multiple job interviews, but each time he was turned down. He apparently insisted that he was a ready-made asset due to his esteemed university degree and sought executive-level treatment. After being rejected by numerous organizations, he finally realized that his attitude was the issue and took a more conventional job. But 6 months later, he left again after attempting to bargain with another resignation threat. He is now allegedly living in substandard housing and gambling away the money he earns from part-time work. Following Miles' departure, the business was able to get an even bigger deal from the project I was awarded, which led to a significant contract that is anticipated to guarantee our stability for the next decade. I will soon be promoted to division director as a result of that accomplishment. The good vibes that have returned to the office, however, are what I am most happy about. We collaborate rather than criticize one another, constantly trying to improve. We keep moving forward in this spirit, full of energy and productivity. The return of the young worker who had quit due to Miles was one of the most unexpected and heartwarming events. It seems that his old coworkers had called him to let him know that Miles was no longer there. I was brought to tears when he approached me and respectfully asked to be rehired. He has developed into a dependable senior worker who assists in running the business today. I'm glad we kept this gifted employee on board. It's crucial to use caution when selecting our partners, regardless of how understaffed we are. After all, collaboration with your team is what builds work. You can't do it alone. I'll keep defending this productive workplace going forward and make sure I understand what really counts. Making decisions that leave no room for regret is the goal of all of this. I entered the office today with that determination, prepared for the day. I'm James, and I now work for a female CEO as her driver. Miss Smith, my employer, is a nice woman who is well known for her substantial contributions to numerous charities. I thought she was going to be out soon. I took a quick look at the time and saw that the dinner meeting was almost over. At that moment, Miss Smith emerged from the restaurant and gave me a kind smile. Thank you for waiting, James. Miss Smith smiled as she entered via the rear seat door that I had opened. Hey, hold on a second. That's a nice car you got there. And with a personal driver, too. The individual who had the distinct appearance of a mafia member was the one speaking loudly. A bunch of similarly rugged-looking men, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, followed behind him. I have to hurry and get the automobile moving. I quickly closed the rear seat door and climbed into the driver's seat. I turned on the car and was ready to go, but... You can't, James. Someone is in front of the vehicle. It's too late, damn it. I'm sorry, Miss Smith. A man stood in front of the automobile, blocking our way with a menacing smile. Even if he was a mafia boss, I couldn't just run him over. The reputation of our company was in jeopardy. Hey, let's talk. If you don't, we'll dissect it. The gang entered the automobile with force and took hold of the door handle. How the heck? It's now unlocked. Oh no. I forgot to lock the car in my hurry, and the men threw open the doors. The men hauled Miss Smith and me out by force. Taking Miss Smith by the chin, one of the mafia members hissed, "Let's see that rich face of yours." Jake, doesn't this face look familiar to you? Well, I recognize her from TV. That wealthy woman CEO is her. The man named Jake replied, "Well, lucky us, running into someone with so much money," evidently delighted by what he saw on Miss Smith's face. She's also extremely attractive. This one will provide us with a good time. What do you want? Miss Smith inquired sharply. Jake gave a nod. I'm Jake, the Golden Viper's underboss. I'm after money. Give it to them. As he spoke, Jake chuckled heartily. I take it you've been contributing to children's homes or something. And that too, for $1,000,000. Would you mind making a donation to us instead of all those odd places? Jake bent closer, but Miss Smith gave him a stern look. I wish to provide money to people who are in need. I don't want to give money to you because you don't appear to be in need. You rich? What did you just say? Do you think the mafia is beneath you? How dare you speak to me in such a manner? Jake gave an angry shout, but Miss Smith didn't seem to be fazed. After this, I have further appointments. I'm going to leave now if you don't have any genuine business. There's no way I'm letting you go just like that, Jake snarled. Jake firmly gripped Miss Smith's arm as she attempted to stand. Hey, let's get this female CEO back to work. Once we threaten her a little, a woman like her will be happy to give us the money. I felt my fury boil at Jake's ugly smile. You bastard, I yelled. Stop, James. I started to yell angrily, but Miss Smith stopped me. It's okay. But Miss Smith. She shook her head when I looked at her. Then she faced the smiling mafia once more. Okay, I'll accompany you to your workplace, but this fellow is merely a driver. This is unrelated to him. Please release him. Miss Smith, merely a driver, is about to be taken by the mafia, but she's still standing up for me. What a good-hearted individual. I can't, however, let them take her. I moved in front of Miss Smith after hearing her remarks. My patron is Miss Smith. She cannot be brought to a mafia office, in my opinion. What is this? You little nobody, stepping up like you're somebody. Jake smirked and gave me a hard punch to the stomach. James. Because he's so keen to keep her safe, let's include him as well. Making him witness what we do to his priceless boss will be more enjoyable, Jake commanded. We were both hauled off by his soldiers. The mafia took us to their office by forcing us into their car. The men inside bowed their heads at Jake when they arrived. Hey, where's Boss Carson? He's currently not in. We have no idea when he will return. That's convenient, poof, mumbled Jake. Jake led the way to his own room, confirming that the boss was not present. I whispered, "This place brings back memories," as I was escorted through the office like misplaced baggage. Haw. Oh, it's nothing. Jake made Miss Smith and I sit on the floor as soon as we entered. All right, let's keep discussing money. That $1,000,000 is what I want. That's a lot of money your company makes, right? Miss Smith resisted, saying, I can't just hand that over on a whim. Jake struck her in the face with a slap. What do you think you're doing to Miss Smith? Out of rage, I leaped to my feet and gave Jake a face blow. Jake swung back at me, startled, but I sidestepped and struck him on the other cheek. James, stop. When Miss Smith spoke, I froze. I could easily take these guys down and get Miss Smith out of here if I truly let go. But I might expose my past if I do. I took a quick look at Miss Smith's face. I might not be able to continue working for her if my past is revealed. A large mafia member who had been observing from behind tackled me to the ground as I hesitated, and then I got punched in the face by another mafia member. Oh no, they're beating me up. The mafia hit me hard since I couldn't fight them off. James, are you okay? I was lying on the floor with my head resting softly on Miss Smith's knee when she hurried over to me. This is really bad. I really apologize for involving you in this. I was feeling more worse after hearing her cry. Hey, our conversation isn't over yet. Observe my visage. How about you pay me an extra $2 million since your driver struck me twice? Jake gestured at the cheek that I had struck. To be honest, when I spotted you outside, you looked attractive, so I had planned to have some fun with you. I'll pass though, because from what I can see up close, you're just some old hag over 30. So, will you pay the debt, or will you burn in hell? You dare say such a thing to Miss Smith? And 2 punches only cost $2 million. I have no mercy on this mafia trash. I noticed Miss Smith biting her lip as I looked up at her, lost in concentration. Perhaps she was thinking of haggling over the price. Miss Smith. I slowly called out to her. She smiled weakly at me. It's all right. I'll figure out a solution for this. With your driver, what are you speaking about? With those statements, you have just 2 options. Jake walked up to us, snatching Miss Smith by the chin and making her look up. Pay $3 million or take a one-way trip to the afterlife. Miss Smith was being held by the chin, and I could see tears welling up in her eyes. You offend Miss Smith, a person I hold in the highest regard, and then you threaten to kill her if she doesn't pay. Telling her she's going to hell in front of me is just so very rude. Who do you think you were talking like that to, Miss Smith? Oh, what is this? Is the driver upset? I'd wonder. Jake mocked me, sneering at my comments. Miss Smith is going to be in great danger if I do nothing. I can't stand by and let this happen. I have to take these guys out, even if it means exposing my past. I finally made up my mind to kill the mafia in front of me. Give me 1 minute. I'll handle this. I held Miss Smith in my lap, patting her shivering shoulders softly, and got up immediately. Don't do anything reckless. I ignored Miss Smith's entreaties and charged into the dumbfounded mob. I used a punch to the jaw to take out a large mafia member who was unable to respond in time. What are you doing? Are you really considering battling all of us? I took down a fellow mafia member who was standing close with ease. Jake was the only one still standing in no time. What on earth are you doing? This is absurd. How are you defeating each of us? As I continued to wipe out the bigger mafia guys, Jake was taken aback. Appearing scared, he began to retreat. I went straight for Jake's midsection, punching him hard, without responding to his query. How is James that strong? From behind me, Miss Smith's voice quivered with shock. With a comforting grin, I turned to face her and held out my hand. We'll discuss later. Now let's leave this place. Grasping Miss Smith's hand, I began to exit the room. I'm aware of your company's location. You won't get away with this, I assure you. You will not get off lightly because you meddled with the Golden Viper's underboss. Jake yelled from his floored position, but we left the room without turning around. Upon exiting the office, a few elderly mafia members who had been associated with the Golden Vipers for a considerable amount of time noticed me. A number of them gave startled looks, but I ignored them and continued on. I finally stopped when we were outside and sufficiently away from the office. Miss Smith, I'm so sorry for putting you in such danger. This wasn't your fault, James. Actually, I'm grateful that you saved me. Miss Smith spoke again with a pleasant smile on her face. Regarding your past, that's all right too. Till you're ready to tell me, I won't inquire about it. I felt relieved at Miss Smith's pledge. It appears that I will be able to continue working as Miss Smith's driver. Above all, though, I must never let my guard down. Jake is not one to give up easy. I was sitting in the car, as usual, a week after the event, ready to take Miss Smith to her next appointment. If we want to arrive on time, we need head out shortly. Is she running late for her meeting? I was wondering why Miss Smith was taking so long when I heard a woman scream as I looked at the clock. What? What is happening? Stepping out of the driver's seat, I turned to face the building housing our workplace. I watched people shouting as they ran out. The building houses a number of businesses, but the people leaving were all workers for our organization. Is something going on at work? Could it be those people from Golden Vipers once more? I dashed through the doors and made my way to our office floor. Sure enough, it's them once more. I saw Jake and the bulky Mafia members inside the office. The office was a terrible mess, and the Mafia were brandishing bats. They were using their bats to ruthlessly smash computers. The staff members were huddled up against the walls, shivering from terror. If you can, try to stop us. We are the Golden Vipers Mafia, Jake yelled with delight. Disregarding the staff members' attempts to stop her, Miss Smith moved ahead of Jake. Everyone, leave this place right away. I'll take care of this. Come on, get moving. Miss Smith gave her staff orders while giving Jake a resolute glare. Despite their anxiety, the staff obeyed her commands and left the business. Now, the only people still in the office were Miss Smith, the Mafia, and myself. Whoa, putting employee safety first? What an ideal employer. However, they don't matter to me. That driver over there and you are my targets. Miss Smith shot out. Of course, I can't let my employees get hurt, even as Jake held her by the collar, restricting her breathing. Let go of her right now. Why ought I to? Why do you believe I'll follow your advice? Anyhow, Miss Smith, please pay me the $3 million as soon as possible and give that haughty driver over. Until I beat the hell out of him, I won't be content. My response remains the same. I decline. Now release me from your grasp. Oh, is that so? Jake grabbed Miss Smith's collar and raised her off the ground with those remarks. Stop it. Miss Smith kicked her legs up in a struggle. Miss Smith. Hey, just stop it. I hurried to them and held up my fist to strike Jake. Jake was unable to protect his face because he was using both hands, so I delivered a forceful blow. Aw, grab him. Don't undervalue him like you did previously. With a spit full of blood, Jake gave the order for the other Mafia members to launch an assault. The Mafia appeared to believe they could defeat me as long as they maintained their composure this time, as evidenced by their confident smile. We're ready, and we've got weapons too. It makes no difference. Weaklings remain weak regardless of what they are grasping. I then lunged in the direction of the massive Mafia. They laughed at me for approaching them without a weapon, sneering. James, don't do this. Miss Smith covered her eyes as if she couldn't stand to see and yelled in a dejected tone. They believe that in a conflict, numbers count. It doesn't matter how many of these men are out there. Mafia were easy to take down because they were clumsy and ill-coordinated. They attempted a simultaneous attack, but ultimately got in each other's way. I took them one by one in a methodical manner without taking a hit. Jake's attitude went from arrogant certainty to pure shock as less and fewer gangsters stood tall. What in the world is happening? Why, such moron minds? Just one unarmed civilian, that's all. Jake's arrogant smile disappeared as he tried to process what was going on. For you, this marks the end. There is nobody left but you. This is too good to be true. A single guy took us all out. Jake murmured in disbelief as I quickly took down the last of the Mafia. Denial gripping his head. He could not face truth. Not at all. You couldn't possibly defeat us all on your own. With a yell, Jake lunged directly towards me. I smirked and gave him a strong slam on the ground, taking advantage of his momentum. Jake thudded hard on the ground and writhed in agony. Even so, do you know who I am? I am the Golden Viper's underboss. The boss won't let you off lightly if you touch me. Despite his injuries, Jake was able to get to his feet and make a threat towards me. What does it matter if you're the Golden Viper's underboss? To me, that is meaningless. What? You're only a civilian, yet you're not afraid of the mafia. It speaks volumes about how low the bar is that someone like you could end up as the underboss. And with that, I kicked Jake hard in the stomach. With a groan, he doubled over and fell to the ground. There was an unsettling silence in the room as the other mafia members were all down. Wait a second. Is Miss Smith okay? Regaining my composure, I glanced around for Miss Smith. She was standing in the room's corner, observing me closely. Miss Smith, are you all right? I went up to Miss Smith, who had just been yanked by the collar. She gave me an incomprehensive glance. You seem a little upset. Oh, I'm very grateful. I'm all right. Miss Smith hurriedly straightened her rumpled collar upon hearing what I had to say. After taking a quick look at the dead mafia members and the moaning Jake, she eventually returned her attention to me. Exactly who are you, James? You assured me I wouldn't need to inquire. With a bewildered expression on her face, all I could muster was a sardonic smile. It seems I can't keep it hidden any longer. Taking everything into consideration, I realized it was time to come clean about my background. Remaining silence was no longer an option. I opened my mouth to speak, but Jake yelled at me. Oh no, this isn't the end. This will cost you money. Miss Smith, please wait for a moment. Jake was moaning and gripping his stomach when I bent down in front of him. You must keep this in mind. I'll do whatever it takes to bring this company down. Jake sat on the floor and spat violently. I exhaled. You're still with me, huh? Okay, I'll give your supervisor a call. I took out my phone and began to dial. Master, who do you want to call? The police? I wish you luck on it. We have the local cops in our pocket. Jake thought he got the better of her and sneered. But all I could do was smile. I won't be phoning the police. I'm going to phone Boss Carson, your boss. What? Boss Carson. You're correct. The leader of the Golden Vipers, Boss Carson. Before anyone answered, the phone rang a few times. My name is Carson. Who is this? I'm not familiar with the number. Hi there. It has been a long time. It's James here. As I introduced myself, I heard Carson take a short, surprised breath. Where's James? It has been a very long period. What is happening? At my place of employment, Jake, the Golden Viper's underboss, and a few of his cronies made a big deal. They're in custody with me. Could you please come get them? Give the address to me. I take it you're also there. I'll be there right away. I gave him the company's address, and he promptly hung up. All right, your boss will be here soon. How do you even know his number? Jake questioned incredulously, but then a cunning smile appeared on his face. All well, anything. You're done when he gets here. I had to laugh at Jake's cockiness. Boss Carson and a few of his men practically exploded into the room a few minutes later. He had obviously hurried to get here because he was out of breath. You arrived quickly, Carson. I anticipated you taking longer. I didn't anticipate how quickly it happened. Carson was panting fiercely, perhaps from hurrying to stop me from leaving, and held his breath until Jake finished. Madam, take action against this jerk. He touched my troops and myself, the Golden Viper's underboss. I'll lose all respect if you ignore this. Still believing Carson was on his side, Jake yelled in exasperation. Carson, though, avoided even looking at him. Is this truly you, James? James. It has been a very long time. He hugged me after saying that, tears rolling down his cheeks. Boss, You know this guy? Shocked by Carson's odd behavior, Jake inquired. What? Does Golden Viper's head coach, Boss Carson, know James? What is happening? Not only was Jake taken aback, but Miss Smith, who had been witnessing the incident in silence, also expressed her amazement. I've kept my past hidden, but I used to be the underboss of the Golden Vipers. 8 years ago, you were a mafia member. Miss Smith questioned, her stunned eyes wide. Indeed. Although I don't have a criminal history, I was a member of the Golden Vipers. I left the mafia 8 years ago following an incident, and this company took me in. Wait, you were the underboss of my organization. Jake cried out as Carson carried on with the tale. Yes, James was the most dependable underboss I've ever had, and he was even vying to take over as manager. However, James was involved in a serious car accident due to a rival group ramming his vehicle during a gang dispute. Following the accident that claimed his fiancée, he made the decision to leave the mafia. You're correct. Even if it's all behind us now, I'm still happy to see you. You were our underboss then. Though you had already retired when I joined, I've heard tales of your might, so I never got to meet you. At that, Jake went to his knees and gave me a deep bow. Why am I being called that? Jake mustered a sycophantic smile as I thought, the way he grovels makes my skin crawl. You are a legend among the Golden Vipers. I was unaware that it was you. Please pardon me for not knowing better. Jake bowed so deeply that his forehead almost hit the ground. Unfazed by his abrupt apologies, I cast him a chilly glance. After everything you've done, an apology doesn't mean anything to me. Boss, I know it's not my place as someone who's left the organization, but... James, say whatever comes to mind, Carson prodded. I'll then be upfront. Are you aware that Jake has been picking on average people? An underboss who publicly criticizes businesses throughout the workday isn't helping the company. You're accurate. I had no idea he had progressed this far. Carson gave me a nod in response to what I said, pausing briefly to think. It's strange that this hasn't blown up into a bigger problem before now, boss. I'm sorry. I might have overreached myself this time, but this woman was going to give me $3 million. As an homage, I intended to donate a sizable chunk of it to the group. You knave. Did you really believe that using such tactics to get that much money would get you away with it? I'm sorry, I was short-sighted. As Carson shouted at him, Jake quickly bent his head. It is impossible to ignore abusing your authority as the underboss and putting the organization in jeopardy. To force you to accept responsibility, I'm going to deprive you of your rank and banish you from Golden Vipers. That seems reasonable. I agreed, nodding, pleased with his choice. The mention of expulsion made Jake's face pale. Please wait. You can't just kick me out without warning. Wouldn't a pay reduction or demotion be more suitable? Are you currently disobeying the boss's orders? Be mindful of your speech. Carson hit Jake with that, sending him flying across the room. You were to blame for this. You were never cut out to be Golden Viper's underboss. I erred when I replaced James with you after he departed. Not at all. I'm capable of being the underdog. Kindly think it over again. Golden Vipers can still benefit from my services. No matter what you say, the expulsion stands. After stumbling to his feet, Jake fell at Carson's feet and clung frantically to him. Since I joined Golden Vipers, you've treated me well. I've made every effort to return the favor. Please pardon me. Jake started to cry, but Carson didn't listen. I believe it's time for him to own up to his mistakes. Have any recommendations? I looked at Miss Smith, then gestured to Jake. Since Miss Smith was the one this man directly impacted, it is only fitting that she make the decision regarding his fate. What would you like to do with him? Me? I have the power to choose. Miss Smith asked, glancing over at Carson with a rather uncertain expression. Indeed, the group has already kicked him out. It's up to you to decide. If that's the case, I want him to work with the underprivileged. There are a lot of impoverished people in Japan, and there is never enough help. I would prefer that he labor for the benefit of others. Very intriguing concept. We also manage a care facility that is not affiliated with Golden Viper. Perhaps we could get him employed there. What? An assisted living facility? Not at all. I refused to do it. When Jake attempted to refuse, Carson gave him a frown. Cease speaking. However, there isn't much of a penalty for simply working there. We'll do the following. He will donate half of his pay, and will designate a person to watch him all day long to make sure he works hard and doesn't get into any problems. Miss Smith accepted Carson's proposal with a kind smile. I think that's a wonderful idea. That's a very, Miss Smith, kind of peaceful solution, I thought, grinning at her good nature. Hey, you won't just choose my destiny without asking me first. What say I have in this? You have no say when it comes to your punishment, Carson retorted, brushing off Jake's objections. I'm not going to work in a nursing home. I refuse to participate. Is that accurate? We'll just have to drag you there if you can't go voluntarily. Carson then gave the order for his men to bind Jake. Give me up. The underboss was me. Jake struggled and thrashed, but the men restrained his wrists and feet and raised him off the ground. I'm not taking care of old people at a nursing home. No way. Jake thrashed and resisted even as they took him away. We could always lie to Miss Smith and say we sent you to the nursing home and just dump you in the ocean instead. I groaned as I drew close to his ear and said, Boss Carson was probably tempted to actually make you vanish. You ought to feel thankful that you are still alive. The sea? Is that how the mafia resolves disputes? Jake inquired, looking terrified all of a sudden. By allowing you to work at a nursing home, Miss Smith is showing kindness. Your choice, the elderly home or the beach. Exactly. Of course, we can send you swimming if you would prefer not to work. However, you'd better start cooperating if you prefer to prevent that. Jake looked up at me, his eyes fixed on mine, and I spoke softly. Jake seems to grasp that my seriousness was lethal. He said, All right, I'll work at the nursing home, as he nodded and began to cry. Well, if you're willing to work voluntarily, that's the best outcome. Miss Smith grinned and clasped her hands together, not realizing I was a threat. We'll untie your legs so you can walk on your own. Jake was seated on the ground by Carson's guys, and I freed his feet. Jake got to his feet and bowed his head toward Miss Smith and Carson. After considering my conduct, I've made the decision to work at the nursing home. Would you kindly watch over me to make sure I'm doing it correctly? Miss Smith smiled at his statement. Of course, I'll make sure you're doing well. Jake is attempting to protect himself by asking Miss Smith to keep an eye on him in the hopes that she won't remember and he won't be punished later. Miss Smith was still grinning warmly at me as I cast a nasty glance at her. Oh well, he'll be under constant observation in a civilian society he used to despise. For a man with his pride, having to tend to the exact civilians he used to disdain is the ideal punishment. I could already see the difficulties he would encounter, even though he would believe it would be preferable to being abandoned in the ocean. Best of luck. I held out my hand to give Jake a handshake. He grabbed my hand, and I gave it a hard squeeze that crushed his fingers. I leaned in close and whispered softly, I'll be watching you, as Jake moaned in agony. You're done as soon as you cross the line. It would be simple to cause you to vanish in an accident. You shouldn't count on Miss Smith to be there for you at all times. I took the time to make my point. Then I let go of his hand and grinned broadly. Clearly scared now, Jake offered no more resistance as he left the organization. It has been 6 months since Jake was admitted to the nursing facility. He was ineffective at first, but from what I've heard, he's finally got the hang of it. He even wrote Miss Smith a letter of gratitude recently. It's incredible the impact a shift in surroundings can have on a person. Who would have guessed that guy might become a very good guy? Now, Jake claimed that working in the elderly home was what he was meant to do. I kept driving Miss Smith around in the interim, without once asking questions about my background. That day, which I had always assumed would arrive eventually, did arrive today. I was called to the CEO's office 6 months after the incident. I suppose she ultimately came to the conclusion that she couldn't have a former Mafia member on staff. Okay, I'll take it graciously and give her my sincere gratitude for everything. I gave the door a rap. It's James. Enter now. I walked into the room and saw Miss Smith sitting there, appearing a little anxious. Please take a seat. As I took a seat across from her, I noticed that she didn't appear eager to talk. She probably finds it difficult to say no because she is too kind to let someone go easy. I apologize for hiding my past from you. If anyone found out about my Mafia past, I knew I would have to step down. Oh, I see. Yes, I wanted to stick by your side and support someone who has such a great heart for other people. I am very grateful for what you have done. Hold on for a moment. I take it you called me in to fire me. No. No. You should also remain with me, I hope. But not both a driver and a CEO. Would you be interested in dating me with a view to marriage? Miss Smith asked me, her voice quivering a little. Her face flushed red. I would be honored if that were okay with you. I smiled in response, surprised by this unanticipated turn of events.